At the end of a busy or stress-filled season, many of us do one thing in common. We breathe a sigh of relief. We breathe this sigh when the last bell of the school year rings, when the final box has been unloaded from the moving truck, when the submit button has been hit on a major project. The pressure relieved, the mind quieted, life is finally settling down. This tying up of loose ends leaves us with a sense of lightness, a weightlessness that we hope will last forever. But too often, to our chagrin, a new adventure, project, or challenge captures our attention, drawing us back to the reality of a life lived on earth. In our passage for today, we meet a man named Abraham who's living in the bliss that follows such a sigh. Finally, it seems that everything in his life is in order. He's living in the promised land. He's father to the promised son. He's experiencing relational stability and security with the surrounding nations. One might go so far as to say that he's living the good life. But before he can get too comfortable, Abraham is called on a journey that neither he nor his people will ever forget. Genesis 22:1 says, "After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, 'Abraham.' And Abraham said, 'Here I am.'" Now, I don't know about you, but when someone calls my name, I rarely respond with the words, "Here I am." Growing up, my parents often called to me from across the house. My two most common responses were, "Yeah," and "Just a minute." Too lazy to get up or too busy to be interrupted, I rarely made myself present. Instead, I hoped that whatever it was, I could solve it at a distance. But in Abraham's response, we hear something different. They're the words of someone who has made themselves available. When Abraham says, "Here I am," he's not drawing attention to his physical location. Rather, Abraham's statement reflects the posture of his heart. Through these words, we hear him offer to God his very self. His attention, his time, his energy. It's an offering of all that he is in the space where he is found. If we were to say the same thing to God, it might sound like, "Here I am, with all my excitement, anxiety, hope, and fear. Here I am, with all my doubts and dreams. Here I am, every part of me at your service." After receiving Abraham's attention, God then presents him with the most difficult of tests, a test that far surpasses the scope of our imaginations. He says, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." Now, in the past, God asked hard things of Abraham. Remember, at the age of 75, Abraham left his country and his family to go to the land that God had said he would show him. Therefore, this test that Abraham is presented with is not his first test. However, it far surpasses all others in difficulty and shock factor. Now, child sacrifice was not unheard of in Abraham's time and place. It's a practice that he was likely familiar with to some degree. And while scholars are conflicted as to how common it was, they do agree that on occasion, people did sacrifice their children to obtain the favor of particular gods. Thus, it's possible that while shocked, he was not surprised. Abraham may have thought it a natural request. He may not have known, as we do now, that human sacrifice is appalling to God. The shock factor then is not the practice, but the person. God has asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the son of the promise. When God called Abraham to leave his land and his family, he promised him that he would make of him a great nation. Though at the time Abraham had no children, the implications of this promise were that he would have children. But after several years, Abraham and his wife Sarah remained childless. And so with the promise in mind and little hope that they might themselves conceive, Sarah gave to Abraham her servant Hagar that she might bear a son for him. And Hagar did in fact conceive and give birth to a son, Ishmael. However, 13 years later, the Lord again came and spoke with Abraham. Making a covenant with him, the Lord changed his name from Abram to the more familiar Abraham, which means father of many nations. And then most significantly, he said, "Your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him." Here we learn that Abraham would have not one son, but two. And sure enough, by that time the following year, Abraham and Sarah held that second son in their arms. When God refers to Isaac as Abraham's only son, it's likely with these things in mind. While biologically Abraham had two sons, with respect to the covenant and inheritance, he has only one. And it's for this reason that God's command is so shocking. Because he's asking Abraham to lay on the altar not just his beloved son, but the hope of the promised blessings of which Isaac, his only son, is an embodiment. This test, while difficult, is at its heart quite simple. The question is, do you love God? Or do you love what he can do for you? I imagine that it was a sleepless night. The instruction that God gave to Abraham would surely bring about intense emotional turmoil, laden with questions, doubts, and searchings of the heart. What's interesting is that we hear no conversation between Abraham and Sarah, nor between Abraham and Isaac. We get no glimpse into their relational dynamics or feelings about the events that are about to take place. Instead, we're simply told that at the crack of dawn, Abraham gets up, makes preparations, and gets on the road. It's on the third day of their journey that they finally see the destination. Now, if you've ever been on a long road trip, you know that they provide you with a lot of time to think, a lot of time to reflect. By the time Abraham, Isaac, and his servants arrive at the place, he has had ample time to consider what God is asking him to do. The decision to offer his son on the altar will not be hasty or rash. It will not be a reaction, but a thoughtful decision. When they finally get near to the spot, Abraham tells his servants to stay back. He and Isaac will go on alone. But notice what he says to them. He says, "The boy and I will go over there, and we will worship, and then we will come back to you." Our human experience might lead us to interpret this response in a few different ways. One, it's possible that Abraham is lying to his servants. Two, it's possible that he's in denial, lying to himself. Or three, trusting in God's promise, Abraham truly believes that both he and Isaac will return. The third option is what we see reflected in the scriptures. Thousands of years later, the author of the letter Hebrews writes, "By faith, Abraham, when put to the test, offered up Isaac. He who had received the promises was ready to offer up his only son, of whom he had been told, 'It is through Isaac that descendants shall be named for you.' He considered the fact that God is able even to raise someone from the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive him back." Abraham's faith is such that even if his son dies on the altar, he believes that God will raise him to life again. His promises will not fail. So on they go, father and son, with Isaac carrying the wood and Abraham the tools. It's on this more intimate journey that we hear Isaac speak for the first time. Observant and curious, he asks his father a question saying, "The fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Isaac knows that they're going to worship and offer a sacrifice to God, but missing from the picture is the sacrificial animal. In response, his father says to him, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." Once again, we catch a glimpse of his complete trust in God. When they do arrive at the place, Abraham builds the altar, arranges the wood, and then lays his bound son on top. We have to wonder what Isaac's response was. Did he resist? Did he participate willingly? Does this event tell us anything about Isaac's faith or just his father's? Well, we can't know for sure. What we do know is that what is about to happen is truly horrific. Finally, after everything is set, Abraham takes the knife and is about to kill his son when all of a sudden he hears a voice call out to him with urgency, "Abraham, Abraham." Responding in the same way as he did just days before, he says, "Here I am." And then he hears the words that will cause him to breathe a sigh of relief once more. "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." The moment that Abraham shows without question that he will follow through, God says, "Stop." By not withholding that most precious to him, Abraham proves unwavering commitment and devotion to God. Now, some might ask why it was necessary for God to test Abraham. After all, he's all-knowing. Surely he already knew Abraham's heart and how he would respond. But there's a difference between cognitive knowledge and experiential knowledge. Using Abraham as an example, James says, "Was not our ancestor Abraham justified by works when he offered his son Isaac on the altar?" You see that faith was active along with his works, and by works faith was brought to completion. In other words, Abraham's faith informed how he lived. It translated from his head to his hands. God may have known his heart, but Abraham showed him his heart. Church, how does your faith affect what you do? How does what you do affect your faith? Is there any correlation between them? Or is there a disconnect? Bible scholar Tremper Longman challenges us with these words. He says, if our new relationship with God does not have any effect on our thoughts, attitudes, relationships, and behavior, then we have to question whether or not we are people of faith. God may never test you in the way that he tested Abraham on that day. But when tests and trials do come, how will you respond? Will you, like Abraham, press in and express wholehearted devotion no matter the cost or the benefit? Or will you, in the name of fear and self-interest, withdraw, turning away from God? After he was stopped, Abraham looks up, and there before him is a ram. His trust in God was not in vain. Indeed, he does provide. Seeing Abraham's faith and his need, the Lord provides for him a substitute. It's for this reason that Abraham calls the place Jehovah Jireh, or the Lord will provide. Geography was never my favorite subject in school, but here I find it fascinating. In the land of Moriah, the Lord revealed himself to Abraham. A few hundred years later, on Mount Moriah, Solomon built the temple, the place where God's glory dwells. And a few hundred years after that, Jesus, who is God with us, died on a cross in the vicinity of Moriah. Like Isaac, he carried the wood for the sacrifice on his own shoulders, but this time he was the substitute. The sinless, spotless Lamb of God, Jesus willingly went to the cross in our place according to his Father's will. As John tells us, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that whoever believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. Here we see that what God asked Abraham to do, he himself would do, that we might live with him forever. Paul sums it up nicely in his letter to the Romans, saying, "He who did not withhold his Son, but gave him up for all of us, how will he not with him also give us everything else?" Church, he who was provider then is provider now. This week, may your trust in him continue to increase as you delight and take hope in his great promises.